Welcome to Game Over Montreal. Let's hope that the Montreal Canadiens were saving their energy for Tampa tomorrow night because that was not a banner game. I'm here with Blain Potvin from Habs Unfiltered. Blaine, how you feeling?
Uh, Kind of tired from watching that game.
Yep.
Almost
Yep.
got
It
put to
was
sleep there.
it was not great. It was not great. I think it was like 11 shots with 5 or 6 minutes left and then they started to turn it on a little bit there, but yeah, I can't say that one was one where we were writing home and talking about how great they are. There's not a whole lot of positives. I thought Jake Allen was pretty good.
Yeah, yeah, he
Other
was
than
solid.
that,
Well, it
other than,
honestly, the last few years in Florida have kind of sucked.
yep,
But if we're looking at improvements, 2 years ago it was an AHL team that paid a visit. So
true, true. At least there's some players there now, but it wasn't a game where anybody really shone bright. I will say, despite the fact that he took a bad penalty in the first there, I thought like it's always a joy to watch Nick Suzuki. You know, the little subtle things that he's able to do to stay competitive when he's behind the play or out muscled. I always find some enjoyment out of watching him, but man, that was just a rough game overall. I guess if I'm looking for giving anybody flowers, I'd say compared to the last game, and I know Anderson scored last game, I thought that Monahan, Anderson, Evans line was much better looking tonight than they were last game.
they didn't get a lot of shots through, but they did generate a lot of opportunities.
Yes. Who did get a lot of shots through, Blaine? No.
Caulfield is pretty much the only one.
Yeah, I mean, I thought David Savard had a couple big slappers, but other than that, like, man, I don't know how we're gonna build three segments out of that show. Brendan Gallagher had three shots, I guess. He looked all right tonight, but all his shots were from way, way out. Right? He doesn't have the speed to get in deep, so it's a tough one.
It was about 25 feet further away from the net than he normally is.
Yeah, yeah, quite a bit. Yeah, let's talk about how things went wrong tonight because obviously there's a lot of focus right now on Yoel Armia, which I get because he's always there in the crosshairs for Habs fans anyway. I don't think he meant to take off the guy's helmet. I thought that was kind of an accidental situation where he got tangled up with a guy trying to get around him. I don't really blame him for that, and I think that the way that he's been playing since his call up has earned like a little bit of leeway for UL Armia compared to the previous years. Like at least right now, I look at UL Armia and I see a guy who's putting in effort. So I understand that people don't like him and he's overpaid and all that, but he's playing decently.
Well, I mean, he's doing what he always does. He shows up, then he disappears. He shows up, then he disappears. But with that penalty with the helmet, I don't know if he meant to do it, but he did mean to put the guy into a little bit of a headlock to
Yes.
slow him down, give him a hard time. And that's the part that was careless because then he takes that chance and then it hurt the team.
Yeah. And I mean I guess you could say the same thing about Suzuki earlier in the game, right? Where there's no reason for him to reach out with the arm.
No,
And as much as I thought Suzuki the rest of the game was pretty damn strong, it seemed like nobody's head except for Allen really was really in the game tonight.
no, not really.
I mean, maybe
Well,
Struble and Harris, they were
yeah,
all
I was
right.
about to say, I was about to say those two.
Same guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, with Suzuki, it's one of those rare mistakes that reach in. The team was going off for a line change. He was there to kind of put a little bit of pressure on to slow them down, and then he reached in for God only knows what reason. He was exhausted at the end of a shift,
Yeah, he
so
was.
I, maybe he just wanted 2 minutes off. I don't know.
The confidence of the captain. You guys will kill it for me, right?
Yeah,
No, they will not, Nick. They will very rarely kill a penalty lately. I mean, let's talk about the PK later. We'll do that in the second segment because I feel like that's a whole thing on its own. But
yeah.
one thing that I noticed tonight that kept them, because honestly, I thought Florida played a terrible hockey game. They were not able to get into the middle of the ice for most of the game against the Canadians, and that is really out, like for them. If I was their coach, I'd be pretty upset with how they played tonight because the Canadians were dishing them softballs all night long. I'm not sure I've seen a game this year with so many defensive zone turnovers. These soft pushing the puck to the wall situations, like maybe this is controversial, and you can tell me how you feel about it as well, Blaine. But when I see a team that's kind of stuck in their own zone and they're trying to clear the puck, and they know that they can't finesse it in a way that won't be icing, but they just push it to the wall, I'd rather you just ice it. Like it just makes more sense to me to ice it than give up possession in your own zone and try to scramble and get it back. At least you've got a 50-50 shot on that face-off to get possession.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Like it's something I teach the kids that I coach from age 7 to 18 is pretty much that. Don't give the puck away at the blue line. That is, doesn't matter which blue line it is. As soon as you give that puck away, those are the two worst areas to do it at. And the little soft one hand push, I mean, what's the point of even trying? Like there's
Yeah.
nothing on that. So yeah, I agree. Just toss it out. If it's an icing, it's fine.
Yeah,
At
and
least
I
it's
thought
not in your zone.
one of the few times in this game where the Canadians kind of kept the Panthers from creating a lot of havoc in their own zone was they iced it twice in a row. And it seemed like it threw the Panthers off their rhythm. And I was like, you know what, guys, just keep throwing it out. If you don't have an option, ice it. I don't know if the NHL, like how many icings you can get away with in a row before they call a delay game, but test it out. You know, if you're overmatched, at least make them work for it, right? They've got to skate the length of the ice. You can take that time off. You don't have to chase it down like Anderson did the first time. Take advantage of the rules a little bit. As much as last show with Tredge, I was saying we need to punish
Yeah.
teams for taking advantage of the rules. But when you're overmatched against a team like the Panthers, who are clearly wildly better than the Canadians at this stage,
Yeah.
just lean on it. You don't have to play this game where you're just turning the puck over constantly. I really don't know what was going on tonight with the decision making in the defensive zone because it was brutal to see them try to clear the puck.
Well, the Panthers had a pretty good forecheck going, and it really threw the Canadians off, especially down low. They did a pincer movement almost every single time,
Yeah.
and it slowed down the Canadians' transition game, which then caused a little bit of panic, and it kind of snowballed. So I give a lot of credit to Florida for causing that issue, but it's not something that a team can't adjust to.
You would think. You would think. Yeah, they were like a buzzsaw on the forecheck tonight, but I find anytime a team is getting forechecked for 60 minutes, if you're
Yeah.
not adjusting, that's a bit of an issue. And like maybe they were pacing themselves, thinking they'd rather take it to the Lightning. There's probably a bigger rivalry between them and the Lightning than them and the Panthers, but I don't know. I would like to see them actually push back against the Panthers one of these games because it's been almost 2 years now that the Canadians have just been beaten to oblivion by these Panthers. I mean, you could go back aside from that, uh, Carey Price's last game, the 10 goal spot up on the Panthers, essentially AHL team in Montreal. That season as well, there was one game where they played the Panthers. Remember, they had 14 people because of COVID and all the injuries they had. It's been really rough against this team in particular, and I don't know if it's so much that the Panthers are so much better. Like they are better, but I don't know if that's like there's other teams that are as good as the Panthers that the Canadians play better than the Panthers. Maybe it's a bad matchup stylistically, but I don't know. It just seems like they've phoned it in a little against this team.
It does feel that way, especially after what we saw tonight. Maybe what they need is a Max Domi Ekblad incident to kind of wake everything up again. Uh, I mean, Pizzetta tried to get something going there at the start. It seemed to wake them up a little bit because the Canadians had one of those rare starts to a game that started at the start of a game.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it
I would
was kind
disagree.
of after that initial start that everything fell apart, right? And
Yeah.
when Suzuki took that penalty, it was kind of the turning point in the game in a lot of ways. But they got it back on the power play, and then St. Louis got the nice coaching challenge there on the offside to keep it even. But Let's transition into the penalty kill because I feel like there's stuff to talk about there. There's some nitty gritty to chew on that also like it's the same situation as getting those zone clearances and the way they play defensively at even strength. But before we get into it, I got to remind everyone who's here live, please like the stream. And hey, if you're watching on replay or listening on the podcast, same thing. Head over to YouTube, like the stream, subscribe to SDPN. If you're on one of our podcast platforms, make sure you like us and rate us there as well. Share with your friends. Always helps to grow the show, and we really appreciate it. We appreciate our fan base and our viewers, our co-conspirators on this show as we try to take over the league and cover the Montreal Canadiens in a fun way and give people catharsis after games. So help us grow. All right, the PK. I find outside of Jake Evans, the PK is just really passive. Like extremely passive, especially at the blue line. They don't apply pressure. And I I get it to a certain extent for certain players. Like David Savard, I get being very passive because he's slow and he wants to stay near the net to block guys out and block shots.
Yeah.
Ironically, he was the one who was chasing on the game-winning goal, right? Gave Luosterainen like 50 feet of room. I don't know how he managed that as David Savard, but for the most part, outside of that, outside of him, like they have enough speed that they can push a little bit harder. I don't know why they don't transition to a more aggressive PK.
Yeah, it seems they're playing instead of a boxer, they're playing diamond. They're trying to keep that cross ice seam pass from happening, and their focus is so much on that that they're forgetting that there's that whole U shape around the outside where they're moving the puck at will, and if they can't force them to leave the zone, eventually their diamond's going to break down, just
Yeah,
like you mentioned, where Savard let a guy gave some guy so much space he was an astronaut.
you're not wrong. Yeah, it was a lot, and I think when you look at how successful PK is run nowadays, whether it's a diamond or a box formation, whatever you want to call it, uh, fast forwards especially are very important. And on defense, you need speed and physicality, like a combo, right? But you look at this team, and a guy like Mike Matheson, he has stretches where he's incredible on the PK and stretches where, because he's Mike Matheson and he's always thinking offense, he overhandles the puck or tries to do something that he shouldn't in that situation. I feel like we've got to move away from playing Matheson like 30 minutes a night and let him
Yeah.
settle a little bit and focus on what he's good at. And maybe it's time to remove David Savard as well because he's a little bit too slow. He has great specific skills, but I'm not sure they're great for a modern penalty kill the way that power plays work. And you mentioned trying to cut off the cross seam pass. I don't remember who was on the ice for the goal that got called off, but before that goal, 3 straight slot line passes.
Yeah.
I don't know many PKs that give up 3 straight. Like you got to block one of those passes.
Yeah, the fact that there was three kind of normally they score on the second one, but I guess they flubbed on that shot.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I agree with the speed of the forwards. The Canadians' penalty kill when it was successful, it had someone like a Byron, and they're not really using those assets as much.
Yeah.
Like a Yolonen. Yolonen would be ideal at the top of the box.
Yeah, did you notice at the end of the game there he did take a shift with instead of Armia on that line?
Yep.
It didn't result in much, but I would like to see him get more ice time. I'll say that.
I think he's earned it.
By now, you would think, right? Like it seems like I know last game he had like an absolute incredible game on that fourth line, and I think it's fair to say Ylönen is carrying that fourth line in terms of like driving play. Like Mitchell Stevens has he makes a few smart plays here and there. Michael Pezzetta can show some skill once in a while. He can one time a puck, which is always a surprise from a fist punching guy. But overall, I don't think either of those guys are carrying the mail. It has been Ylönen, and if you're gonna move Jake Evans back to center maybe at some point, then maybe it makes sense to bump Ylönen up because you've got somebody who can has a proven track record of running a fourth line. But at some point, they've got to make a call with Ylönen because he's been knocking at the door for too long now to keep giving him 6-7 minutes a night.
And his points per 60 is fairly high. I don't think he's about middle of the pack for the team, but when you're playing 8-9 minutes a game with those two players, you're not going to be putting up a ton of points. But
Exactly.
he's still creating. His forecheck is there, the passing's there, the shots there. He's still using his speed, so he's showing all the assets that he needs to play up the lineup, at least on a third line.
Yeah, like give him some opportunity with some skilled line mates, right? Like we know he has a shot. He hasn't had a lot of chances in the NHL to get into positions to shoot. Early in his first call up, I found he wasn't working to get into those positions. Now I find he does get there, but no one's getting him the puck. So like, it just seems like a wasted opportunity for the kid.
Yeah, he's going through the motions. He's showing what he can do, and he's just hoping if he follows the process, it'll eventually happen for him.
Yeah, and
Let's
I
hope it
guess
happens soon.
yeah, I mean he hasn't complained, so I guess you also have to give that to him, right? Because
Yeah.
that's a tough thing when you. I'm sure he feels like he deserves more because how could he not with the way that he's playing, right? But yeah, I don't know. There's some questionable decision making in terms of line combinations, but probably not something that matters super for like a lot for this game. Like I don't think there was much roster rejigging that would suddenly make them win this one. I will thank the Montreal Canadiens for not letting this game go into overtime. Because I swear, if I had to watch even more of it and then go to bed even later, I'd be pissed.
Could you imagine stealing a point after only getting 11 shots on net? That would be insane.
I mean, Alex Stolar's in net. There's a chance, right? Like, he's not a killer goalie. I think that's what was most frustrating about how tentative the Habs were to shoot, especially in the first period when they were getting opportunities. It's like, this is a goalie who doesn't play a lot. Like, throw the puck through him. You can get lucky bounces here and there. You can get him panicking and moving side to side. And it seemed like they just weren't that interested in doing that. There was a play, I think it was in the first period, where Suzuki got the puck in the middle of the slot and then elected to pass away. Like he was unchecked in the middle, nobody in front
Yeah.
of him, passed to Matheson. And I was like, okay, fine. Now Matheson's going to shoot. He's in a pretty good position at the top of the slot as well. And he's like, now I'm going to pass to Caulfield on the goal line in the corner. And Caulfield's like, what, in my skates? Okay, I'll try to shoot it. And it's like, this is the stuff that drives people nuts, right? And you have people yelling
Yeah.
shoot in the crowd. And I know players hate that because obviously we don't see what they see, but I'm pretty sure both Suzuki and Matheson could have shot there.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Caulfield believes the same thing because the surprised look on his face that he had when the puck showed up, he was there for a rebound. He wasn't
Yeah.
there to take a pass for a quick shot. And you're right. Yeah, they absolutely could have shot there. And I mean, my son was yelling shoot. I don't know how they didn't hear him.
Oh man. Yeah, I don't know if you saw it. My youngest came down to watch a little bit in the first period, and he told me that he when he plays hockey, he wants to be the herder. And I was like, "What's the herder?" He's like, "I'm good at herding when I get on the ice." He thinks that there's
Funny,
like,
I hurt too.
yeah,
It's usually my
I'm great
knees.
at being hurt. That I'll
Yeah.
say that. But yeah, I guess he thinks that some people are allowed to just go around and like hit everyone all over the ice and not play the rest of the game. I mean, I guess some
Novel
people are.
approach.
The
It's a
Ryan
novel
Reeves
approach to the
approach.
game. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can sit on a bench too.
Yeah, exactly. I could just yell about how tough I am and flex at the crowd and not actually do anything.
Well, whoa, that's Treg.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my God,
Gotcha, buddy.
too good. All right, let's keep moving on because this game is just not the best material to talk about. But I think there is something that we can bring up that I think is topical for the last few games, and just seeing the conversation on Habs Twitter and stuff. Is it time to bring back Arber Xhekaj from the American Hockey League? You know, we've talked for weeks now about how much Justin Barron is struggling, and I didn't think it was like a game to highlight Barron in particular for struggling. I thought he had some good moments and some bad moments. His biggest thing to me is when his back is to the play in the defensive zone, he just assumes that he has time and he doesn't look over his shoulder. Just start looking, Justin, and you'll be okay. Because when he's under pressure and he knows he's under pressure, he's not so bad. But when he thinks he has time, man, it's brutal
Yeah.
out there. But I think you look at, I know there was a lot of people talking about in the last game against Carolina, nobody like stood up for Slavkovsky, but I think the Canadians were pretty physical that whole game. I don't know if
Mhm.
it's necessarily for the fighting that I would want to bring up Arber Xhekaj, but I do think his physicality adds a dimension on defense that the Canadians are lacking a little bit, and it also brings that out of Gooley a bit more. So I think I'd like to see it in short order.
Yeah, I agree. I would like to see more from Gooley on that side as well. But with the way Strubal's been playing, Harris is back now.
Yep.
Uh, there's not really a spot there unless they decide to move Strubel back down. And I don't see them wanting to do that. On the other hand, I do expect Xhekaj to be on the line in that lineup by the time the All-Star break comes around.
Yeah, you got to think at some point this season, there's a decent chance that Savard gets traded for one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's the Montreal Canadiens, so there's probably going to be injuries. Uh, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to sending Barron down to the American Hockey League again just to let him get his confidence back. I mean, every time he goes down there, when he comes back up, he's a better player, right? So as long as he's not waiver eligible, taking advantage of that doesn't seem like a bad thing. And he doesn't seem to sulk when he's down there either, which I think is a really, really good sign for a young player. And not that Xhekaj is either. He's actually playing really well down in Laval and putting up crazy points. Scored tonight in Laval's win there. Or I guess not tonight, today. It was an early game. But I would like to see him again in the NHL because I'm a little surprised by how much, like how many people think he was playing poorly this year. Because like his underlying numbers were really stellar, offensively and defensively. So I don't know. I think there's more to him than what I thought he was initially, what a lot of people thought he was initially. I see a guy who has the potential to be like a number four, number five defenseman, and that physicality makes him so much more effective than the average four or five defenseman because he can shoot the puck through the net or he can just kill you.
It's also that intimidation factor that he brings.
Mm-hmm.
Teams are legitimately game planning when he's on the ice. And that changes things. People have a second guess. Oh, like Nosen with that hit on Slavkovsky. Had Xhekaj been on the ice at that time, maybe that wouldn't have happened. Well, it probably would have, but he would have second guessed it at the very
Yeah,
least.
might have had a thought
And
about it, right? Might have not hit as
yeah,
hard, right? And I think that there's that narrative about like fighters doesn't hold up. But I think when you're talking about a guy who plays a regular shift, it's a different story, right?
yeah,
It's not just a Ryan Reeves out there. And also, I think you're talking about changing the game plan. What Xhekaj brings is sometimes you are getting teams that blink a little bit or flinch a little bit, and they will play a Ryan Reeves instead of a better player because Arber Xhekaj's in the lineup, and now you have an advantage because Xhekaj's not going to play 5 minutes; he's going to play 17.
exactly. And that fourth line on the other team is going to suffer from that. And then your fourth line could take advantage. So guys like Ylonen being on a fourth line at that point, it's not a big deal. It's actually a good idea if that were to happen.
Yeah,
So with Xhekaj coming up, I do think that he deserves the call up, but at the same time, the only player like you mentioned that I could see going down is Barron, and I agree he needs at least a game where he's in the uh, the press box where he can refocus,
yeah,
and that's been his thing since he was 12. He needs to do a little bit of refocusing every now and then through the season, and being in the area that he grew up in, everybody here kind of we know him well.
yeah. And that's been like a consistent thing for him. Sometimes he needs to like recalibrate a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some players are just like that, right? And maybe he'll grow out of it as he matures into, like, I know he's 22 now, but I mean, as you get older, I think, when I was 22, I was like, yeah, I'm an adult. And now in my late 30s, I'm like, 22 is kind of a kid. You know, I wouldn't disregard anything a 22-year-old said as like, oh, you're too young for that, but it's like you're still not fully formed, right? You're not yourself yet. And I think that's true of NHL players, most of them anyway. You're not going to send down a Connor Bedard or something, but there's more to be added to Justin Barron's game and Justin Barron the person than what we see right now. But if he always ends up being the guy who needs to recalibrate once in a while, but when he's recalibrated, he's a good player. That's still a good player. Sometimes guys need smacks.
Now, one game off here and there. I
Yeah.
mean, at the very least, it gives them a little rest, and it kind of negates that whole uh, in the injury routine. It comes from fatigue for the most part with the Canadians.
Yes.
So at least that would be off the plate for him. We hope.
Yeah, and hey, with load management being a thing in other sports these days, like it's just another way to do that, right? Where he's getting mental time off and physical time off. It could be a good thing. I like that idea. We had a good question here. We can transition into the questions as well. But before I do, make sure everybody hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, have some fun here. And yeah, throw your questions in the chat. There's a good one from Trizak. Says, Andrew, thoughts on Elliot Freeman saying tonight that he believes Kent Hughes has a price for his goalies in mind and isn't budging. Uh, from what I heard, because I don't pay total attention during the intermissions because I really can't handle how bad they are. No offense, former employer Sportsnet, but I think he said that Hughes would be willing to go down a little, but not much. And that's kind of been the modus operandi for Kent Hughes with all of his trades. So I respect it. And there's so many teams struggling with goaltending right now that I get it. But at the same time, the longer you wait, sometimes those issues resolve themselves. So I think in the new year here, like if it's not done by January, end of January, let's just get it done.
Yeah, I think he has a drop dead of value that he has on players, and right now probably the value that's being offered is well below that
Yeah.
because that's always the way it is with goaltenders.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. Like goalies just don't have the trade value that forwards or defensemen do. And even if with desperate teams, right? Like they're usually willing to attempt to rehabilitate the guy that's there more than you would with like a defenseman who's giving away the puck like 20 times a night, right? Like that guy's just getting sent. He's getting sent somewhere to Siberia, like they never want to see him again. But then you have Stu Skinner being given chance after chance in Edmonton, blowing winnable games for a team that should be a Stanley Cup contender. And I think
Yeah.
Stu Skinner is going to be a decent goaltender eventually, but last year in the playoffs, things went totally off the rails and he hasn't fully gotten back to what he was before.
Yeah, he's someone that would benefit from Jake Allen, for instance, that
100%
veteran
agree.
presence. As someone who can take some of that like load management again, take some of those games off and show the young guy how it's supposed to be done, how to prepare, how to set up, how to study these players. I know the Leafs would love to have a goalie with a save percentage above 890.
Oh, God. It's a low bar, isn't it, eh?
It's Toronto.
Yeah. Would you trade a goalie to Toronto, though? Would you help
Not a
them
chance.
save that sinking ship? Yeah, I wouldn't either. I would
Well,
trade some certain players to Toronto, specifically because I know that he wanted him big time in Calgary. I would trade Josh Anderson to Toronto. I think he would actually fit in pretty decently there, and I wouldn't worry about it like hurting the Canadians long term. And I think Treliving would overpay. That's the big thing because the big trade that was rumored around the draft when Slavkovsky was drafted, that there was like first round picks being tossed around for Josh Anderson. I'm pretty sure, I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure just from talking to different people that one of the offers on the table was from Calgary.
yeah, I wouldn't have been surprised. And it would also have like a Sam Pollock feel where he's giving Anderson to Toronto that eats up so much cap space. They can't sign Nylander, and suddenly he ends up in Montreal.
Oh god, that would be so funny. Imagine if they think Anderson's the Nylander replacement so that they let him go. Oh,
And they
John
offer up
Smart says
all
Adam
those.
Wild would lose his mind. Yeah. I don't know if like would you trade Jake Allen to Toronto? I don't know if I would.
It honestly, if they're willing to provide a little bit above my value, sure.
Yeah. I just don't want Jake Allen to win a Stanley Cup with Toronto, you know? That would not sit
Well,
well.
I don't see them winning a third round. I mean,
They've
statistically
never done it.
speaking, they've exactly.
It's a bad game night, so we're dunking on Toronto now.
We
Let's
need
see.
something.
Yeah, we got to have something in our lives that's funny. That's fun here. Let's see if there's any other questions here. A lot of teams getting tougher this year, says Trinka. Xhekaj coming to the Habs last year changed the picture of the Atlantic. That is true. Like, the Atlantic did load up. I don't know if it was all because of Xhekaj, but it seemed to be very coincidental timing.
Yeah, it was like right after he showed up.
Yeah, and Trinka also says, imagine if you did send Connor Bedard down to the American Hockey League. Yeah, I don't think that would be able to happen. I think his agent would be up in ears quite quickly.
I think the fans on Madison would lose their minds.
Oh man. Yeah. Can you imagine what that team would be this year without him?
Oh,
They might be worse than last year.
it might be worse than an AHL team.
Yeah. There might be AHL teams that would beat them. I mean, geez. 11 wins with Connor Bedard. And he's playing so damn well without much help. It's pretty crazy.
If they
I
end
did
up with
see.
Celebrini, oh,
Oh my
I'd be
god.
so mad. So mad.
They can't win another one. They might still, which
Yeah.
is insane. I did see there was a moment in the game that I did appreciate with Brendan Gallagher, where he was kind of at close to the end of a shift, but you could tell he had some gas left, and there was that puck clearance, and then you knew he wasn't going to get it, but he just like turned on the jets and pressured both Florida defensemen to push back hard and kind of tired them out before he went back and ended his shift. And I said that he was allergic to ending a shift with air in his lungs. Like he's just such a competitor. And I saw somebody replied to it and said that his shifts are too long, always out there too long. So I went and checked it. His average shift this year is 48 seconds. It's one of the lowest on the team. So Gallagher haters, come on, be rational.
I mean, if he could go a full minute, minute and a half, I would take it because he's that one guy that no matter how he's feeling, he's going to give you everything he has. May
Yep,
not be enough, but it's everything.
this is true. Oh, Trizek asks if I had any further thoughts about my proposed Anderson for Huberto trade idea. I just threw that out for fun. I don't actually think it would be a good idea. The Huberto contract is insane. And even for 2 million retained, which is what I like the scenario that I proposed, like 8.5 is a lot for Jonathan Huberto right now. But I do think there's a tendency among Habs fans to just lump all francophone players together. And I saw a lot of people reply like, "Oh, just be Drouin 2.0." And they're different people, guys. Like they have French names, sure, but they're not the same guy. It doesn't necessarily mean the same fate. And I know that there's a lot of Quebec players who come to Montreal at the end of their career and it doesn't pan out. But I do think I wouldn't do it because the contract is terrible. But I do think Huberto, when he's put in a good situation, creates a heck of a lot of offense. And Calgary is like the antithesis to a good situation for him. Just the way that they play as a team doesn't fit in at all. I do think the Canadiens would win that trade on talent, but the cap hit situation is just brutal. Like, could you imagine having to try to deal with that Huberto contract while you're trying to re-sign like, Lane Hudson and David Reinbacher and Uri Slavkovsky? Like, it would just be a nightmare, a logistical nightmare.
His decline is going to be at the time you need these guys, and they won't
Mm-hmm.
be able to trade him off at that point. And you're just eating up what about 8% of your cap, probably 6% at that point, but that's still a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And Kay is in the chat defending Jonathan Drouin. I'm not trying to hold Drouin up as like a colossal failure or anything. I still think that Drouin was like his whole situation was destroyed by Bergevin's regime. where he came in, he should have been seen as a middle six winger with a lot of talent that could become better than that. And they were like, no, first line center. He just got like absolutely destroyed at center. He is not capable of playing center defensively. And you know what? The guy still puts up points. He went through a crazy goal drought. Uh, I know a lot of people criticize his effort. I never saw a lack of effort from Jonathan Drouin. I saw a guy who just does not have defensive instincts, and he tries really hard, but it doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. And no, we saw that here in Halifax as well. He never had to work on defense because he
Yeah.
always had the puck on the offensive side. So it wasn't a surprise to see that lack of defensive awareness. And I agree. Like he did do everything he could, but he wasn't set up to succeed.
No. Yeah, it wasn't a system that was tailored to his strengths. It wasn't a position. He didn't have line mates that were tailored to his strengths either. Like, it's kind of like Gallagher now, right? Like we know Gallagher is playing good hockey this year. And you see a lot of people are like, well, he's not scoring, he's not putting up points. How many points do we realistically expect from Brendan Gallagher on this specific team that doesn't put up a lot of points in the first place and playing with like Christian Dvorak and UL Armia? Like that's not a line that creates a lot of offense, right? Gallagher needs players who can make plays and he can finish them, right? And he does a lot of little stuff all around the ice, but at the end of the day, he's more of a net front guy offensively than anything. And that doesn't necessarily mean scoring. He can distribute from the net front too and create chaos. Those guys aren't pushing the play offensively.
No, he's a buzz saw, and with most buzz saws, you need a craftsman to push that buzz saw forward, and
Yes.
that's what he needs. That's what he needs, and I agree. He is not quite getting that. Don't get me wrong. I like Dvorak. I like his defensive awareness, but offensively, he's just not there.
Yeah. I mean, I think Dvorak's significantly better in his all around game this year compared to last year,
Mhm.
but the scoring just hasn't come. Outside of that stretch when St. Louis first took over and he scored like 10 goals in 20 games or something like that, he just hasn't been able to find that touch in Montreal. And I don't know if that's a systems issue or if he's just not as good as they thought he was offensively. I know he wasn't a huge scorer in Arizona, but he had like a couple decent seasons there. It just hasn't worked. And what I'm seeing with that line is they get possessions, they can forecheck really well, but with Gallagher specifically, because it's kind of his responsibility to do everything, he's the
Yeah.
one carrying the puck into the offensive zone. So he's not able to be the one who's driving the net, and that kills his offense. So a lot of times it's Gallagher gains the zone. Armia and Dvorak aren't there yet. They're, being responsible defensively, sure, but they're not necessarily contributing to the rush. So Gallagher takes a shot from 35, 40 feet out, and then it's a one and done. Maybe Gallagher will cause a turnover in the corner, or Armia will, because he's a pretty decent forechecker as well. But it's just like three cogs that fit well in certain areas of the game, but not for scoring.
That'd be a really good playoff fourth line.
Yes.
They can grind it out, eat up a ton of time, not give up anything. But if you're looking to them to create offense in a top nine role, it's not there.
No. No. And I mean, Gallagher's had his hand exploded twice, so his shot is not what it used to be either. He needs,
Yeah.
like, in an ideal world, I feel like Armia is a 10 to 12 goal a season guy. Dvorak's like a 15 to 17, and Gallagher at this stage is probably also a 15 to 17. And when you put all that together, it's not a lot of goals for that line, like, unless the defensemen are like Eric Carlson and Prime Ray Bork, you're not getting a lot of goals.
And none of them are really playmakers.
Mm-hmm.
So he got three guys who are good at puck retrieval, but not creating. So yeah, it kind of eats up time, but doesn't give you much.
Yeah. Jean Simard asks, he says, Anton Lundell has fallen out of favor in Florida. Could he be a reclamation project for Hughes? I don't know a ton about Lundell. I thought he had a good game tonight on the fourth line for the Panthers. How old is Lundell? Does anybody know?
I think he's 23. Was he a
I mean, that's pretty young for a
2021 draft pick?
22.
Oh, there
22
you go.
from
Yeah.
Finland. I'd have to take a look at his numbers and everything, but 22-year-old Finnish player, that's usually a decent sign. He's been in the NHL for a couple years already. Maybe. I'd be open to exploring it.
When he was drafted, there was a lot of offensive upside to him that they were looking for it, and he hasn't really pulled it off in Florida. And
Yeah.
Hughes loves reclamation projects, so I don't see why not.
Yeah, there you go. So we get a two thumbs up from that one. Chris Hansen says those three aren't getting 20 goals total. You're probably right. Between the Gallagher Dvorak Armia line, like what we were saying is in an ideal world for each player, that's probably what you can expect to score in a full season, right? So I'm not saying that line is going to score, like 50 something goals this year. That's not going to happen. They don't fit each other in a way to like top each other out, right? Top each other. I'm throwing terrible things out there right now. Michkov, is he going to come back to bite us? Asks Patrick Spino. Probably.
I know he's not tall enough.
He could bite Cole Caulfield.
Yeah, there you go.
Probably right in the top of the
Yeah.
head. Yeah, I think that one's going to be a tough one. I will say, like, as bad as the reaction has been for a year and a half after the Slavkovsky draft, right now that draft is looking pretty darn good. So maybe the same thing happens with Reinbacher. Maybe the Canadian scouting staff is a lot smarter than we give them credit for. I don't want to give them that win right now because Michkov is absolutely lighting up the KHL and Reinbacher has struggled this season after an injury, but it probably Michkov will bite them.
Yeah, I do think that's he's going to come in. He's probably going to have a couple of good seasons, and Habs Twitter is going to lose their minds. But Reinbacher is going to be someone that they're going to really, really adore. When he was here for the World Juniors, he played the whole tournament without eating solid food. He was so sick he couldn't do practice. He they helped him out of bed and took him to the rink, and he still performed well. So that's the kind of guy you're going to get. And he does have offensive upside. He's solid defensively. He's a big guy. And he fits with Lane Hutson so well, skill wise, that
Yeah.
I think the fans are really going to like him.
And I do think I don't know if it's necessarily the best draft strategy, but I look at those two picks and at the top of the draft, I think it's really dangerous to operate this way. But I do think they saw Slavkovsky and they looked at Caulfield and Suzuki and thought, perfect. That's the perfect fit. And they looked at David Reinbacher and they looked at Lane Hutson and they thought, perfect. So they're planning out how the team is going to look 3, 4, 5 years from now instead of taking necessarily the top end talent in terms of just like scoring ability, which would have been Logan Cooley, or maybe Shane Wright. Probably not Shane Wright in the Slavkovsky draft, and it definitely would have been Michkov or Zach Benson in the Reinbacher draft. If it all works out, I will hand it to them on a silver platter. I think it's a very risky way to go about things to draft, not just for team need or like roster construction need, but like specific. I'm gonna bet on Lane Hutson making it, and therefore this guy will be the perfect partner. I think Lane Hutson is gonna make it, but it is a very risky way to go about things.
It's kind of a NFL style planning where they
Yeah,
pick guys to fit certain roles. And had Reinbacher been a left-handed player, there's no way in heck they would have picked him.
that's true.
They probably would have went with Leonard at that point, which honestly would have been who I wanted.
Yeah, I would have been fine
I
with
was
Leonard.
all in on him. So yeah, it's they have a plan. They're sticking to their plan, and I hope to God their plan works out. But there's some things in there that you don't see a lot of from NHL GMs, like that NFL style look at it.
Yeah, I do like that unique approach to it, right? And I think we can see that not just in drafting, the way that Hughes trades, right? He
Mhm.
holds everything. He will not budge on a lot of these moves. And sometimes it takes forever and it's frustrating. But on all of his trades, he's made good value back, right? So
Mhm.
It's interesting to see somebody who has a very cerebral approach after the scatter shot of Bergevin for a decade. So that I like, but we'll see how the drafting turns out. Roland Briere asks, would you agree that the big issue is the forward group as a whole? I mean, in terms of building the team towards competitiveness, definitely. They need star talent up front. I think if this Suzuki, Caulfield, Slavkovsky line sticks together and plays as well as they have been, that's a line in your top six that's nailed down. But you need another line that's probably as good as that or better to be a
Yeah,
Stanley Cup
definitely.
contender.
I mean, they've got Roy coming up. They've got Farrell, who should be coming up soon. They've got some good young players who can fill that middle nine role,
Mm-hmm.
but there's still no star power. That's where that Michkov pick is going to hurt
Hurts.
for a little while.
Yeah, and like if they get as lucky as you could possibly get this year, and they get Macklin Celebrini, well, guess what? Filling those other two spots on the top line becomes a lot easier. Because when you have a fully elite, like franchise level center, then you can put a guy like Joshua Waugh on the top line, and his job is just easier, right? You're a complimentary player now. You don't have to carry a line. You've got to facilitate this superstar, and he's going to do a lot of the tough things for you. He's going to get you the puck in situations you never imagined the puck was going to get to you, right? So finding that star makes the other dominoes fall a little bit easier. And the Canadians do have good forward prospects in the system. They're just further away than the defense, right? We're seeing on defense right now, it's like a cluster of so many NHL ready defensemen, and then more coming up right behind them with Hudson and Reinbacher, and you could argue Mayu and even William Trudeau could be an NHL ready defenseman in the next year or two. They need to have that same level of depth at forward and a superstar. It's a lot.
Yeah, and with the number of players they have that are coming up, those NHL ready defensemen, they're not all going to make the team, so they're going to have to
Yeah.
package some of those up, and maybe that helps them get to what they need.
Yeah.
Like
Like
I would
already
like to
they've beat
see.
the odds with defensive prospects. Like what's
Oh
ready
God,
right
yeah,
now.
way
Uh,
way sooner. And if they can get a Cole Iserman slide down to their slot, even better.
yeah, yeah. I've seen some people very skeptical of Eiserman because of the way he plays, but hey, if they finish higher than we think and he slides down, that's all right too. Bernard Arsenault reminds us that Doc is also there. Yes, Doc. Losing Doc is really the story of the season in a lot of ways. I feel like if they did have him from the start of the season onward, we'd be tearing our hair out. No, I mean, I wouldn't be able to. I could tear my beard hair out about this proposed top pick this year because there'd be no chance this team's in lottery position with Doc in the lineup.
Well, right now they were before the game started tonight. They were 5 points out of a playoff spot, which I'm going to be honest was a lot closer than I expected them to be at this point of the year.
Same.
But losing this game is going to push them back, especially with all those teams between them and that playoffs.
Yeah, and they'll likely lose tomorrow as well. I mean, they might not, but Tampa Bay is turning it on. Vasilevsky's back. That's a tough one for them on Tampa home ice. Kay says she thinks that Hughes is planning to trade for that offensive star. I think that's one thing that can't be overlooked, right? Is as much as you want the draft to be the venue because it's usually cheaper, you have more loyalty from the player, you have them for a longer amount of time. If the Canadians can't get into the top of that draft and draft a superstar, I see two avenues that are open for them in the next couple of years to land a superstar. One is this summer, if Vancouver falls apart down the stretch, which is highly likely considering the way that they play and how lucky they've been from a shooting percentage standpoint. I saw the other day the last like 12 to 15 games, their shooting percentage at even strength is 16%. The league average is like 9.
Oh,
They're 5 percentage points ahead of anyone else in the league. They're just lighting up everyone. And like Thatcher Demko is great. I don't know if he's this great. So I expect them to fall off. Maybe not in time to miss the playoffs, but if Elias Pettersson at the end of the year is not happy, I would look at that as a possible trade. The Canadians have a ton of assets that could be sent back the other way that are NHL ready or close to it for Vancouver, probably more than most teams. And the other one is if Edmonton keeps crap in the bed, Leon Draisaitl is an unrestricted free agent in 2 years. Just saying. We already know he doesn't mind
Yeah,
playing in Canada,
I can see that would be an amazing one.
right? Wouldn't that be a perfect fit?
He's got a cottage in Sudbury, so
And I would drop league max
it
on
would be.
him
It would be. I
with
like the
no
Peterson one too.
hesitation.
Oh yeah.
Send Cole Caulfield to his house, can knock on the door and go in the doggy
Yeah,
door. Yeah,
with a
I
bag of
think
money.
with a bag of money, yeah, just carrying it. It's as big as he is. But I think those are things that we have to look at and that Kent Hughes has to look at if the draft doesn't work out, right? Is you look at what teams are vulnerable to losing their elite players. And those players rarely change teams. But if you can dump a league max contract on a guy, like Edmonton won't be able to afford to do that.
No, no, not if they're planning on keeping McDavid.
No.
So yeah, that they have to overpay. If they're
Yep.
not doing it through the draft, they're going to have to overpay in some way, be it in assets or in money.
And for those kinds of players, you overpaying is okay. It's you get if you're getting a premium asset, then you pay premium prices. Trinka says, "Do you think Hughes has enough pull to bring people to Montreal?" He says, "I guess Hughes and the coach. Does he have ins with former clients?" I think if you listen to what people are talking about around the league, first of all, there's a lot of players who are interested in playing for Marty St. Louis, and the culture that the Canadians are building here is known, right? You see this team that really shouldn't be in most games, and they play hard almost every single night. 90% of tonight not included. Uh, Hughes has a good reputation as a player agent. As a GM, you look at the players who he's traded away and the way they speak about the organization. It's really night and day different from the last regime. And I know that people are concerned about like taxes and all that, but first of all, NHL players don't pay taxes the way that we do. They have accountants to help them get out of that. And also, players from other countries pay a flat tax in Canada. I believe it's like 20%. Alan Walsh, who's part of the network here, has explained it before that they don't pay full income taxes. They should, but they don't. So I wouldn't worry about that. I do think Montreal will become an interesting destination for a lot of unrestricted free agents very shortly.
Well, yeah, with them coming up, like you mentioned with St. Louis, uh, the fact that the team is improving and it's the market that it is, there's going to be players that want to go into a market like that to experience winning because they saw what happened during that playoff run when the city just lit right up and the players loved that. So they talk.
They
They all
do.
talk to each other. I would not be surprised to see if I would not be surprised to see a few of them show up.
Yeah, and you know what? That moment when Anderson got the first star at the Bell Center and the crowd just went
Yeah.
absolutely nuts for him breaking that goose egg and finally feeling like himself. I would wager at least half the NHL has seen that video. Those
100%. That's a
things.
player who, like in another city, they would have probably been booed off the ice at some point prior to that. But in Montreal, they recognize and they appreciate the effort that he was putting in. And they truly wanted him to know how they felt that he finally got that monkey off his back.
100%. 100%. And I do think Montreal a few years ago probably would have booed him, right? But I think the fan culture has changed. I don't know if it's COVID or if it's going through a rebuild and realizing that it's a different scenario, but the fans at the Bell Center are not nearly as negative as they used to be. And I think that that is also something that helps the team both on the ice and off of it.
Well, I think the fan base, one, is getting a little younger,
Yep.
and two, the rebuild has kind of humbled the fan base as a whole. It's not this whole 24 Stanley Cup thing anymore for a lot of them. It's,
Yes.
oh man, we're rebuilding. It's the first time it's been done in the city, so that might be playing into it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, most of the fan base has probably seen one or two cups their whole lives, right? Or
Yeah,
zero.
or seven.
Or some of us who are lucky have seen more, but a lot of the fan base that are at these games now, who are buying season tickets, who are like young professionals or in approaching middle age, uh, haven't seen a lot of success for this team. So committing to building future success instead of constantly doing band-aid solutions, I think it sells well in the current market.
Yeah, exactly. And they're they're marketing the team properly in the rebuild. They're they're managing expectations and they're giving the fans that little carrot, the hope. And they're putting the young guys out there to kind of push that. So that seems to be working. The marketing side, Chantal Maccabi and all what she's been doing, it seems to be working really, really well with this fan base.
Yeah. Oh, and Chenandler Bong 76 says, "Do you think Crosby comes to Montreal at the end of his career?" I have heard from a shocking amount of people that it's a high chance, a high probability that Crosby, when he's unrestricted free agent, signs like a sweetheart deal to finish it here.
Yeah,
Don't bank
if
on it, but
Pittsburgh doesn't, no, if Pittsburgh doesn't want him to stay, then he'll go to Montreal. But if Pittsburgh offers him $1 to stay, he'll stay in Pittsburgh.
I'm sure they'll offer him $1. I guess it depends on like, can Pittsburgh get to the playoffs, right? And I don't know if Pittsburgh's going to make the playoffs before Montreal does. Like, it's thin
Yeah,
there.
it's a 50-50 shot right now for them. They're
Yeah.
kind of just outside of it.
Yeah, Kay says he's going to Colorado. That's also a possibility. Playing with Nate McKinnon would be something that he would want to do as well.
Well, he's also friends with Marchand.
Don't go to
So
Boston.
uh,
He can't do that. Aginlaw already did that and ruined my view of him.
yeah, that would suck a lot, especially living where I live with all the Bruins fans that are around
Oh
here.
yeah, yeah.
Oh dear God.
There's a surprising amount of them in Montreal too, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, yeah.
But all right, we'll end it there. We managed to find some level of entertainment out of a horrible game of hockey from your Montreal Canadiens. Thanks, Blaine, for joining me. Before we close things out, tell everybody where they can find you.
Well, right for the hockey writers, I provide some hockey write-ups for Crier Media as well, and you can find me on the Habs Unfiltered podcast.
There you go. Check those out, everyone. And everyone who's watching, thank you so much for watching. This is my last one of 2023. I've done a lot of them. I will be here for a few more years at least to do more before, I don't know, who knows what we'll do. This is a long train of thoughts here that I'm getting myself into. I don't need to do that. All right, we'll see you in the new year. Mark's going to be on for the next few games and against Tampa tomorrow. We'll see you then.